Hello, all. Garland Nixon here on a Thursday, hanging out with the one and only Mark Sleboda. We got one or two things to discuss. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. We're hanging out with Mark Sleboda. We got some interesting things to talk about. But first, and most importantly, before we get going, everybody needs to know where they can find Mark Sleboda and all of his fine works. Look here, boosty.to/The Real Politique. That's right. You've been looking for where you can find Mark Sleboda and all of his work, where you can support him, someplace that, shall we say, sanction proof. Well, this is it. You can subscribe, you can chat, you can donate. We are up to 111 subscribers, so let's keep going. It's easy to become a member. So go to boosty.to/The Real Politique. And if you look on there, you'll see like Mark's latest his latest interviews, if he's writing anything, things that he thinks important, we can review, all kinds of stuff. So The Real Politique is at boosty.to. Make sure you check that out and subscribe and all of that kind of stuff. All right, Mark Sleboda, let's get rolling. Let's start
it has
here.
to be said, not The Real Politic at busty.com. That's something entirely
different. Yeah, exactly. Busty.com. Yeah, it sounds like a good place. You know, a lot of people probably might want to visit busty.com, but they're going to keep it quiet. All right, let's get going. Phone calls everywhere. Let's start. There's two big ones, and let's start with this one. Macron, a man who is beaten mercilessly by his elderly wife. Now I guess is called Putin for whatever reason. Your thoughts on and whether or not it's related to the alleged cessation of arms to Ukraine. Macron, Mark.
So yeah, thanks for having me, Garland. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show. So yeah, this is the first phone call between Trump and Macron in 3 years. So pretty significant.
You mean Putin? You said Trump and Macron. You mean Putin?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Macron and Putin. It's although Trump probably would like to go for 3 years without talking to Macron.
He kind of hates him, doesn't he?
Maybe vice versa as well. They can do it. Obviously, this call was initiated on Macron's part, and Macron has been talking about re-engaging with Russia for several months now. Of course, he imagines it as being more on European terms, but there was put forward within the EU the idea that someone should become essentially the ambassador of the EU to reignite dialogue with Russia. It was said, and then Macron kind of stuck up his hand and I'll do it, right? And they're like, he hates you, and they're like, no, he loves me, right? You know, and the EU high foreign policy muckety muck, Kaya Kallas, from Estonia, she immediately jumped into the fray and said, well, I'm the EU high foreign policy muckety muck, which, you know, the office that imagines it's a foreign minister of the EU, which of course is not a state and does not have a foreign minister. But everyone was like, are you kidding? I mean, you can't talk to Putin. You know, you hate him. He hates you more than he even hates Macron. I mean, that's like a joke. So
you're a Nazi. He doesn't. You're a Nazi. Yeah. He doesn't like Nazis.
She's I wouldn't say that she's not a Nazi in the traditional sense of the word, but she is a postmodern liberal Nazi. That is absolutely for sure. And she does come from a country that does have government sponsored Waffen SS parades. So yeah. Now, so Macron has finally stepped up to the bat, and I think you're right. I think, why now? That's the question. So, I mean, one of the obvious things is how bad it's going for the Kiev regime on the battlefield. But it is very likely that probably during the last week's NATO summit in Belgium, in The Hague, that the Trump administration probably let the other, at least the major European power, know that they were about to stop the supply of several varieties of missiles and munitions, including Patriot missiles, Hellfire missiles, and I think one of the more important ones is 155 millimeter artillery shells to the Kiev regime. And this is because the U.S. stockpiles are so low of these weapons that it is hurting the security of the United States. The Pentagon has long been warning about it. They've been unable to significantly ramp up production, such that would meet both the Kiev regime needs, the needs of the U.S. military, and the needs of all the other U.S. allies around the world, like Israel, which of course needs the Patriots and other such missiles too. And, Israel, Ukraine, wife, mistress, right? The mistress is going to get dumped. That's the inevitable. And the truth of the matter is the U.S. hegemon, the U.S. empire, is militarily overstretched beyond the capacity of their military and their military industrial complex. And this is just a recognition of how bare the Pentagon's cupboard has become under the Biden administration, right? And if Ukraine in the Trump prioritization is several steps down the list, and they get cut. That's the simple matter. So that I believe is a further recognition of how bad the situation is for the Europeans. Because what the United States is trying to do is just dump the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine on Europe's lap, right? They want to pivot to China. They've already been stuck in the Middle East. It seems more than likely that the situation in the Middle East isn't over, in the medium to long term at the very least. And Trump will probably have to deal with that again sometime during the next 3.5 years at a minimum, maybe much sooner than that. So they don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the capacity to deal with everything at once anymore. And this isn't newsflash. Kellogg admitted that the Trump regime's, this former general who is the Trump regime's, he was supposed to be an envoy to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but he didn't get along so well with Russia. So he was basically assigned the role of babysitter to handhold Zelensky. But he said outright that the world has changed because the U.S. used to be able to deal with Russia and China and Iran and North Korea and others, one by one, divide and conquer, deal with them separately. But due to U.S. actions over the last, 2 decades, they've pushed these countries closer and closer together in interest of survival. And the last administration, Sullivan and Blinken was quite open. He thought it was great that the U.S. should take on Russia and China and Iran all at the same time. He was quite open about that. That's the way it should be, he said, right? And that's the cost. The U.S. simply can't deal with everything everywhere in the world. They can't maintain hegemony constantly. So they need to burden share. They need to do strategic sequencing of their opponents, and they need some of their allies who have long been, shall we say, bandwagoning along with the U.S. without, as far as the U.S. is concerned, paying their fair share of the military side of hegemony. And now, Trump, who has not much interest in Ukraine, no real for, contempt for Zelensky, contempt for the European leaders. He's like, yeah, you deal with that. I don't want to deal with that anymore. That's a losing. On top of it, that's a losing conflict, right? He doesn't want to own that one. He wants them to own that one. Trump doesn't want to lose anything, and he can't. He knows that the U.S. is not going to end up on the good side. So he is trying to shuffle it off his plate onto Europe, and the Europeans are well aware of that. I mean, they were told outright this by Hegseth. And of course, they're very reluctantly coming to the realization that Trump is as serious about this as he is everything about foreign policy, which means that this 15 minutes, at least, he's consistent. They decided it was time for, Macron to actually do the deed and suck it up and give a phone call to Putin. And part of this was done under the pretext that it's about Iran, because the situation with Iran was included in the conversation. And it must be said that France took a somewhat less war hawk position on the conflict in Iran than some of the other European powers, the UK, Germany, and the like. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said Israel is doing the West's dirty work in Iran, and they should be grateful for it. Starmer was one step away. He was cheerleading along, and he's like, if I had anything that could usefully participate, I would send it, but we don't. The European powers, most of them were silently cheerleading for regime change, and that didn't work out so well. But France took, France actually spoke out openly against regime change, right? Rhetorically. But I think this is more of a good cop, bad cop routine than anything serious. It was just a position that Macron staked out. And now, because it wasn't so crucial for them, and now he's using that as a talking point. I'm not calling Putin to talk about Ukraine. I'm calling to talk to him about Iran, and we just happen to discuss Ukraine too. That's what I think is being presented here, and I'm pretty sure the conversation went like this. Vladimir Putin, would you please stop beating up on our proxy in Ukraine? And Putin said, "Niet."
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Pretty please? Niet. Well, how about Iran?
Right.
It was supposedly they talked for more than 2 hours. I can't imagine what they talked. That was longer than Putin's phone calls with Trump. And from what we've seen from the readout, the transcript, I mean, yes, they talked about Ukraine. They disagreed. Yes, they talked about Iran. They, at least in broad rhetorical terms, agreed. Not that I think France is really serious about that position. But what they could have talked about for 2+ hours. I am quite sure, although it was not mentioned in the transcript, that Macron once again tried to push for a immediate unconditional ceasefire, right? So that they could save and rearm and regroup with their Kiev regime proxy. And I'm sure Putin, as he's done multiple times before, said no, right?
Do we really have to do this? Yeah, we really have to do this dance again. I already know that when you talk to Starmer and Merz, you said, and I'm going to ask him for an unconditional 60-day, 30-day, whatever ceasefire. So I promise I'll do that. Okay, you've done it. You already did. Okay, so what else?
I think Putin probably already has that on a video sequence.
Yeah,
where it's just presses the button and then it starts playing and he starts explaining no and what his terms are for an actual ceasefire, as he's done ad nauseum for over a year. Since June of last year, when he explained what his conditions were for a ceasefire, which the Europeans. But the Europeans are spooked now, because the Kiev regime is losing badly on the battlefield. The Europeans obviously can't make up for the American weapons. They have no analog for the Patriot, right? They use the Patriot, and the Patriot's not very good to begin with. And even when Biden was fully supplying the Kiev regime with every weapon he could grab out of the Pentagon's stockpiles, Russia was still winning, and now they're winning faster and across a greater stretch of the contact line, faster and faster. It must be said, for the realities of this type of modern conflict, which is quite different from with the prevalence of drones and 24/7 satellite and drone reconnaissance. Things are different, right? But for the nature of this conflict over the last 3 years, the Russian advances are coming faster and faster, and the Kiev regime is less and less able to resist. And the Europeans are aware of this. They're aware they can't make up the difference, even though their rhetoric, is still talking about spending hundreds of billions of euros on their military industrial complex and blah, 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 providing it to Ukraine. And it's all just thought, right? It's all just fantasies of Ursula von der Leyen. And none of it has come to any reality yet that anyone can identify. So I think Putin is a little tired of Europe. I don't think he takes them very seriously anymore. I think he's well aware of what they are. And Macron in particular, with Macron's participating in the dissension over the Minsk Accords and everything else. Putin is the consummate diplomat and statesman. And if the leader of France calls, Putin will speak to him. But there's absolutely no guarantee that Putin is going to say anything that Macron wants to hear. And almost certainly he didn't. So I don't think this is the last such phone call. I think they will become more frequent now. And Macron will probably be the point man on this for Europe for a while. But then I think eventually you'll see other European leaders, fed up and trying their own tack and getting similar answers at best. So I think it is a sign of weakness, I do, by the Europeans. A sign of a recognition of their weakness, a growing realization that is dawning on them. And they're starting to get a little desperate and panicked, but they don't see any way out of this. They can't do what is necessary to come to a diplomatic settlement on Russia's terms because they are unwilling to accept the reality of a Russian victory. They keep hoping for a black swan event to fall out of the sky and change things. That's really where they are.
Well, tomorrow's False Flag Appreciation Day. Fourth of July Flag Day or something like that. So no, they got like all of these poor schlumps that are going to go in the street for the No Kings protest. Don't even start me on that one. So I imagine there'll be like a false flag. They'll blow them up and blame it on, give them some bioterror thing and blame it on Iran.
What is this No Kings protest?
Oh God, don't even.
Some kind of anti-Trump protest? Or?
That's it. And the people that are, it is so fake. If you go to nokings.org, the two people that are running it, these arch Zionists, Leah Greenberg and Ezra Levin, they're behind the whole thing. And just as an example, Leah Greenberg for years worked for Tom Perella. When he ran for governor, she was his top person. When he was in Congress, she was his top person. Tom Perella. You know what Tom Perella did for many, many years? He just resigned lately. He was the CEO of the Open Society Institute for George Soros. And she's one of the ones that's running this thing. And it seems to be very funded, mysteriously so, I might add. And if you read it, it's like no kings, no thrones, no crowns. And like people call my radio show and they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, I got a question. They'll say, what? I'll say, it's a protest. I've been involved in protests before. The Martin Luther King, what did he ask for? Jobs and justice. And they wanted a $2 minimum wage. Sometimes people want health care. By the way, what are you guys asking for? And they'll be like, no kings. I'm like, we don't have a king. Oh, okay. They don't know what they are. So anyway, it's just the CIA op. And I imagine there'll be, some kind of a false flag. Those poor saps, they'll they'll, blow something up and say Iran, Russia, whoever the hell, China, somebody did it. So, hey, I ain't going to be
Isn't
there.
it the same group, largely the same group of people that were just really hot about installing the Shah's son back in Iran?
Of course. Oh, by the way, the last protest they did, their sign in the middle, it was like a hands-off protest, and in the middle it said hands off NATO. But it's totally unrelated to the intelligence community. Anyway, by the way, I'm sure that like what Putin's to have some fun, what he should do is when Macron says, now look, I really got to ask you, this is important. Yeah. Can we get a 30-day ceasefire unconditional? Putin should say, you know what? I think like that okay, yeah, that sounds good. And Macron will go, really? He'll go, nah, just joking. No. The answer, just for a second, just give him the yeah. And when he says, really? Nah, of course not, you idiot. Anyway, so your thoughts on two things. Put together the battlefield update, which ain't looking so good for the Ukrainians, for the Nazis right now. The battlefield update, along with, I heard something like, my God, the Russians are firing 300 drones a day and making 1,000 a day, or some unbelievable number of drones, or But additionally, that accompanied with this business about running, not having more air defense and not getting some of the stuff that they use, that the Nazis use. Mark.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, long range strikes with drones and missiles, particularly on the Russian side. Now, there was one day earlier in this week where the Kiev regime launched some cruise missiles too. So the long range strikes on both sides continue. The Kiev regimes are much smaller than they were a few weeks ago. So they're just pushing over 100 now, and their drones are much smaller, much more. The Russian air defense is much more effective. So generally, they get much more bang out of the buck. They're not on the winning side of a long range strike slugfest. However, they did get some licks in early in the week. In this last week, there was in particular a strike at a factory in Izhevsk. And Izhevsk is in central Russia. As it's has a few military industrial complex facilities, right? That's the only reason it is of any note to anyone of the outside world. And the Kiev regime apparently hit a factory there that was producing short-range air defense systems, including the Tor system, which has done very, very good for Russia in fighting against these drone, nightly long-range strike drone incursions by the Kiev regime. They also apparently make some missile components. The thing about this is Izhevsk is 1,300 kilometers from the front line. So obviously, these drones were not launched from within Kiev regime controlled parts of Ukraine. What is most widely suspected is that these were launched out of the south, out of Izhevsk is not too far from the Kazakh border. And it is presumed that the Kiev regime did another type of operation, spider web type thing, where they had operatives, illegally in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is a big, largely empty country, right? Lots of open space there. And probably they had some more trucks or the like packed with drones or some type of mobile drone setup anyway, and were launched out of there. And really, the thing that Russia needs to take home, they should have from the Operation Spiderweb a month ago and now, is that no place is safe. They are in a war, and that any military facility or non-military facility for that matter, because there's still enough Kiev regime attacks on residential buildings just for the sake of it as well. But that nothing is safe, right? Zelensky had another huddle with Budanov about what David Ignatius called the dirty war that is just beginning. So as they continue to do worse and worse on the battlefield, they will more and more turn to these unconventional warfare, asymmetric terrorism, assassination tactics. And this is, one example of such. My understanding is that they did start a fire, and there was damage done, but they by no means, it was a big facility. These drones, it wasn't a big hit, right? It wasn't enough to destroy the facility or something like that, but they did some damage. And that, that's about the extent of it. Meanwhile, Russia is making much larger assaults. Earlier in the last week, there was one night where essentially 500 Russian Garan drones, the 3, with the new jet engines and everything, stealth coding and the like, and they fly with complete impunity over the Kiev regime skies, striking whatever they want on the ground, as is evident from the videos coming out of the Kiev regime. Whatever their fantasy recounts of how many of them they say they successfully shot down, the reality is quite obviously something far different. The Kiev regime military intelligence released a statement in the last week that they expect Russian Garan drone production, just this one type of long-range strike drones, to reach 700 a day by this autumn, right? Not FPV drone, not recon, just this one type of long-range strike drone, which means that they can use up to 700 Garan a day. Right now, their production is around 500. From what we've heard, and they're obviously not using that many every day, so they're obviously increasing a stockpile of these for use. Right now, they actually have so many of them that they're not only using them for long-range strategic strikes anymore. They've started using them fairly regularly in the rear of the Kiev regime's contact line, right, where their logistics, so they're using them in an operational and even a tactical role to take out weapons depots, command and control behind the front line, something that they're basically, now they have an expanded range of options, because they've been using the FAB and CAB glide bombs for the same things, and now they have an option of using the Garans. That's how many they have available to them right now. So that's not looking good. The Kiev regime did another attempt to break into Kursk region at Tyotkina. It had no more success, than anything else has. They pushed hard for a few days around the time of the NATO summit, and it achieved absolutely nothing. And they were beaten back again. More wasteful attacks that are absolutely strategically pointless, narrative, political driven, and just exhaust their already exhausted and crumbling military. On the battlefield, Russia continues to really make advances. They've essentially pushed into high gear a new offensive in the south, in the Zaporozhye region, in the direction of Tokmak and Orehov. So that is something that the Kiev regime is worried about, shuffling troops around. Also, big gains around Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka in the Donetsk region again, also around Seversk. And Russia continues, to present a threat in the Sumy region, to the capital city of Sumy itself is within sights. So really nowhere along the contact line is looking good for the Kiev regime. Everywhere Russia is advancing. Russia is now taking some 20 square kilometers a day. And again, they're not trying to take territory. They're still fighting their war of attrition. So it's not looking good for them on the battlefield. And it's largely kind of skipped off the headlines in the Western media. They don't have anything good to say, so they're trying to say as little as possible. I think they don't, until the next time the Kiev regime sneaks through a dirty strike on something, then of course the conflict in Ukraine will once again grab the front pages. But until then, the only thing that does is Zelensky whining about not getting his expected weapons.
Do we have any major, what are you looking at as far as any major towns, major settlements, major strong points that look like they would be, I guess one way to put it is the next to fall, being threatened or whatever, that, you know, especially of some strategic significance?
Yeah. So in the last week, Shevchenko was taken in the Donetsk region. This is in the roughly the area of the Pokrovsk. And Shevchenko is interesting because it is reputedly the location of the largest lithium deposit in Ukraine. And that is one of the things that was essentially promised to Trump in this nonsense, not really a resource deal that was more of a statement of economic surrender of sovereignty to the United States. This weird thing. Theoretically, it would be an investment deal, but it didn't. It doesn't seem likely that there's any reality to it. It's kind of interesting why the Trump administration was pushing it so hard, but they've lost the largest lithium source in the country that is now under Russian-controlled territory and unlikely to revert anytime in ever. To be perfectly honest. I think it also has to be said that in the past 2 weeks, Putin himself has been dropping some comments, like at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, that seem to suggest that the Kremlin is at, all right, you know, we're done with this, you know, this diplomatic charade. You're not seeing any reason, and indicating that they might be interested in taking, you know, the whole country of Ukraine. There was a statement that Putin made that basically saying, you know, which areas of Ukraine would Russia consider taking, you know, of the new regions that Russia is moving into. Russia has entered Dnipropetrovsk. Russia has entered Sumy region. Russia is very well developed in the Kharkov region right now. And the question, you know, where would you consider, you know, taking into Russia? And Putin said, well, you know, I consider us brother peoples. Right, you know, we come from the same roots, the same pan-Rus, Kievan Rus roots, and large parts of Ukraine are, of course, naturally Russian-speaking. And it has to be said that this is something that Zelensky himself said during his campaign for president, that he couldn't see a conflict between Russia and Ukraine because they really are, you know, the same people in two different countries. He himself said that before, you know, he became the leader of the Kiev regime. So Putin said, well, because of that, because I consider us, you know, the same people, he said, all of Ukraine is ours. Now, there was a context there, but the context only ameliorates that so much. He also quoted a old Russian proverb or saying, basically saying that wherever a Russian soldier stands, wherever he, you know, walks to, that is Russia. And I'm like, well, that's kind of an imperialist statement. I don't know about that. I mean, Russian troops were in Syria. Russian troops are in Mali. I don't really consider that Russia. So, you know, but I mean, it's in the context of Ukraine. So,
yeah, I think that the intent was specifically that content, you know, it was specifically aimed at Ukraine. And I think we're at a point now where, you know, I think the last time they met in Istanbul, the Russians pretty much told them, all righty, you better take this. We know you're not, but you can't say we didn't give you your last shot at something. And I think that at some point they'll end up back in Istanbul, and at that point, the Russians will just say, sign here. That'll be pretty much it. Sign here. And by the way, that ain't gonna do you no good anyway, because we've got charges filed against every one of you war criminals. And whether you sign or not, you're you know, because that's the other part of it, you know. You negotiate with war criminals who at some point, they've done horrible things and killed entire villages of people in Kursk, raped, murdered, and marauded all over the place, done, all of this that's come out recently about the Crocus City attack. I mean, you can't even, no matter what happens, you can't just shake hands and walk away. These people are going to have to be held accountable.
In a perfect world, I would agree with you. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world, and the reality is that war criminals more often than not escape responsibility. I mean, either they'll be sheltered by some type of rump Ukrainian state, or they'll all be filtered into the West and proclaimed heroes, guerrilla heroes or something like that. I mean,
isn't it Argentina somewhere? Where do they always send the Nazis in South America? They got like
the United States. I mean, that's where most of the Nazis actually went, is the U.S. and Canada. I mean, but yes, some of them were also ended up in Argentina and the like. Maybe the ones that the U.S. couldn't come to, couldn't rehabilitate them to the roles that it wanted them to. So I would say that maybe another big important point is Chasiv Yar, which is it's in central Donetsk region. It was the fallback position from Bakhmut. It's just west of Bakhmut. And Russian forces have been fighting there for at least a year. I mean, it is one of the longest battles. The Kiev regime held on to Chasiv Yar just tooth and nail. I don't know how they made so many people fight so hard for that town, but they did. But at this point, Russian forces are announcing that they have 95% of Chasiv Yar in the last remaining micro-district. It's almost certain that the Kiev regime forces, in order to escape a cauldron, will have to escape from. But other than, kind of putting a final chapter in the long story of the fight for central Donbass in the Bakhmut chapter. More importantly, Chasiv Yar is at a topographically high elevation, and it is essentially looking down over the last Kiev regime defensive line in the Donetsk region, which Russia is beginning to move on right now. That's the Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinovka line. And that will really set up Russia moving on that line almost certainly by late summer, right? Or late summer, early autumn. Russia will make a big point. I mean, they're already in the outskirts of Konstantinovka, at the southern end of that defensive line. But this will put Russia in a very good position going into the last big battle for the Donbass, for the Donetsk region.
Well, it sounds to me like, and here's the thing, when you project when it's going to happen and things like that, that's based on the way things are going. But, if they aren't getting the stuff that they need, things could fall at any time. At some point there'll be a collapse, and you never know when it could be. For this reason, man, I imagine if you're a soldier, you ain't feeling real good right now with Ukraine. You know what I mean? You're fighting a losing cause. Now, granted, you're going to be goose stepping around all over creation and, Sieg Heiland and stuff like that, because that's just what you do. But even the goose stepping Nazis got to be looking over their shoulders now saying, hey, can you send me some more ammo? We don't really have any to send you. I think that's going to have an effect on the way things go. It's just at some point it's going to crap out. And now let's go here. Azerbaijan, a place that, before the Azerbaijan Nagorno-Karabakh crisis and all of that, I really didn't know a damn thing about it, and I couldn't even really spell it. But now they're in the news again. I think there's 10 or 11 million people in Azerbaijan. Two things. Number one, it seems to be that some of that Operation Spiderweb crap was going on in Azerbaijan relative to Iran. Meanwhile, which is a Russian ally. Meanwhile, it seems like they're up to no good as far as Russia has arrested some Azerbaijanis, which certainly seem like they were involved in some organized crime, which, if you know Azerbaijan, is not a stretch. And now they're grabbing Russians beating the hell out of them. Seems to, what's going on with this Azerbaijan? Are they now puppets for the West also? Are they set up to be Ukraine part 2? Are they throwing themselves on the altar to be sacrificed for neoconservative lunatics in the West, Mark?
No, I don't think so. I think that they have a different game here. So Azerbaijan is a small country. It is in the south, the hilly, mountainous South Caucasus, right parallel there, Azerbaijan, and just to the west of it, Armenia. And Azerbaijan just finished off a decades long conflict, and then frozen conflict, and then they've just won a war against a country that is landlocked but has dreams of being a Western proxy under their currently leader Pashinyan, Armenia. But Azerbaijan has been in the driver's seat since their victor over Armenia. Azerbaijan is a Muslim country. Again, a fairly small country, but they are also resource rich in oil and gas. And over the last decade or so, they've spent a fair bit of that money on building up a powerful military, a fairly powerful military, which now that they've essentially defeated Armenia, they're feeling a little long in the tooth, shall we say. They're feeling a little empowered. Now, Azerbaijan has one big ally and one kind of side ally. The big ally is Turkey. And this has very much emboldened Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has become essentially joined at the hip with Turkey. They've been very close, and Turkey was intimately involved in the conflict with Armenia, providing not only Bayraktar drones, but commandos and a lot of other things. The other ally that provided arms and intelligence to Azerbaijan during that conflict with Armenia was Israel. And they provided quite a bit of military intelligence assistance. And what Israel got out of that is apparently Azerbaijan allowed them some basing rights, some air basing rights to project power, to project military force into Iran. Now, there are a significant amount of ethnic Azerbaijani in northwestern Iran, right? You could say, and Azerbaijan has long held, shall we say, regional ambitions to claim what it sees as rightfully Azerbaijani land. So they and Iran have long had tense relations. Historically, but up until the modern day, and it seems that in the recent attacks, that it is very likely the recent Israeli-U.S. attacks on Iran, that some of the aircraft and heavy strike drones were used out of Azerbaijan. Now, in the past week, right, we're looking at a span of a week. I mean, tensions between Russia and Azerbaijan, which once had a fairly decent relationship. Russia sells arms to Azerbaijan. There was a kind of a tacit understanding between Putin and the long-term leader of Azerbaijan, Aliyev. Aliyev is also former KGB. And I think the two men had an understanding with each other. But as Azerbaijan has grown closer to Turkey and Israel, I would say that relationship has become strained, particularly as Russia is notionally, at least, a treaty ally with Armenia under the Collective Security Treaty Organization, and Armenia just lost a war against Azerbaijan, although that was for territory that had previously been Azerbaijan, at least under international law. So Russia did not step in on Armenia's side of that conflict. But there was in Russia, one of the things, if you live here for any length of time, you come to understand that a significant portion of the organized crime that exists in Russia is on the basis of ethnic minority clans. So there is an Azerbaijani mafia, there is a Georgian mafia, there's this mafia. I mean, there's Russian mafia too, right? I mean, but also the very ethnically tight, clan-based, a minority ethnic, from all the former peoples of the Soviet Union, and that are involved in organized crime of all different varieties. And for some reason, there was a concentrated crackdown on an Azerbaijani organized crime network in the city of South Central Russian city of Yekaterinburg. This resulted in the death of two of these Azerbaijani, one apparently just from a heart attack, but another one died being apprehended roughly. And this also involved a crackdown on a local bazaar, a market, if you will, that was essentially owned as a front and part of the business network of this Azerbaijani crime network. And apparently one of the Russian interior minister forces of Rosgvardia was run over by a son of someone important in the mafia network as he was escaping from all of this. So there's lots of inflammation going on both sides. Azerbaijan has responded apparently in defense of this criminal network because someone important, someone wealthy was involved. And there's always the possibility that this also included some intelligence operatives of Azerbaijan. There's a thing. I mean, the CIA regularly works with drug networks and the like. The same, much more intimately, even with Azerbaijan. And they started arresting Russian journalists at Sputnik. They've arrested 7 journalists on absolutely just nonsense, obvious charges that they weren't being paid properly or something like that. I mean, it's just a kind of a tit for tat. What's more, they then started seizing Russians in Azerbaijan that they claim were on drug-related charges, although for most of the people that were grabbed, these seemed like young guys. Some of them were apparent tourists. Some of them were probably Russian liberals who at the beginning of the conflict with Ukraine, often IT people who feared for no reason whatsoever other than Western propaganda that they would be conscripted and sent to fight in Ukraine, or just didn't want any more to do with Russia after that, and went to countries that they didn't need a visa, to live in, to travel in and live to. And a few of them apparently were picked up in this. And they were paraded on Azerbaijani TV in a kind of heavy-handed terrorist apprehension style that Russia often uses for dealing with organized crime in Russia, having their hands pulled tight behind their backs, walking low on the ground, with all these masked Spetsnaz, intelligence, police, SWAT people. And it was quite clear from those pictures and from later pictures in court that these Russians that had been apparently grabbed some Russians. They had been beat pretty badly. I mean, there's no question. You see the pictures; their faces are bloody and black eyes, and they look pretty roughed up. I mean, seriously. I don't really care, necessarily, particularly if they were Russian liberal IT people who fled there. But that being said, these young guys look scared and they were brutalized and they've just fallen afar of this. But rather than just someone, over this organized crime crackdown, there is some Russian reports that there's a much deeper layer to this. And the suggestions is that Azerbaijan owns some oil refineries in Ukraine that have become very important to the Kiev regime's military effort because they processed, they made gasoline, right? And oil was supplied by that. And apparently Russia and Azerbaijan had some kind of deal or tacit deal. And over the course of 3 years, they weren't touched. Well, recently they were touched, and in fact, they were destroyed. So it seems Azerbaijan may be really upset about this. On top of that, Russian reports, again, unconfirmed, but very likely, is that Azerbaijan has been supplying Ukraine with weapons. I can definitely attest that they were providing them with the materials they needed to repair their electrical network, right? But that's not necessarily, that's kind of almost fair game, I would say. That's legitimate trade. But providing them with arms starts making Russia an enemy. And so I think that there is a deeper geopolitical layer going on. And in this, I would assume that Azerbaijan is working in concert with Turkey. Turkey has long been supplying military arms to the Kiev regime and cooperating with it on a whole host of ways. Erdogan famously also continuing trade with Russia in defiance of Western sanctions. He's, as usual, playing the cunning beast, straddling both camps and to whatever he sees as to Turkey's advantage. But he sees right now Russia as weak in the area of South Caucasus and Central Asia, a chance for Russian expansion. Azerbaijan feels emboldened because Russia's not going to do anything against Azerbaijan right now because it's involved in an existential conflict, a proxy conflict with NATO in Ukraine, and they feel a bit emboldened by all of this. And indeed, thus far, Russia has mostly responded with essentially pleas to return to diplomatic, normality, and the strategic relationship that Russia and Azerbaijan have had since '91. Where they've had fairly good geopolitical terms. So I don't see this as Azerbaijan being a puppet of the West to open a second front on Russia. That's not what's happening here. This is Turkey and Azerbaijan taking advantage of an opportunity. Erdogan loves stabbing his allies in the back. This attack on Iran, if it occurred out of Azerbaijani territory, whatever Erdogan's rhetoric for his domestic political base, he's never done anything against Israel. And very likely they were providing assistance at some level also for the attack on Iran. I think this is a geopolitical power play in the South Caucasus and in Central Asia for expanding power and influence by Turkey and Azerbaijan. And what they sense is a window of opportunity because Russia is much more focused on Ukraine, and no one else really has the ability to project any type of real power into the region. Erdogan has long-held fantasies about expanding Turkish influence across this vaguely connected to Turkic peoples, Central Asia, some kind of pan-Turkism. He fits all kinds of weird ideologies in with his Ottoman Empire and Islamist beliefs, anything that geopolitically, ideologically expands, or at least has the potential to expand Turkish power. And that's what I think is going on here. It's a nasty little cancer in the South Caucasus that is not going to go away anytime soon, but I also don't expect it to blow up into any type of full-scale conflagration.
I think you are right. Well, let me just do this. The important thing before we, darn it, I lost it. Before we go anywhere, there we go, is that you visit Mark Sleboda. That's boosty.to /the real politique. Boosty, you can see it BOOSTY /.to the real politique. You can see there. You can become a subscriber. We're up to 113 subscribers. So let's keep going and get to 200. And we can move, go forward from there. And look, you go there, you got everything that's going on with Mark right here. You got all his you can see the various look at that. There you go. You can see the various places that he does interviews, keep up with all of his good works and be a part of it. And most importantly, you can help be a part of the alternative media sphere. You can help things, keep all of this stuff going. Remember, whether it's me, Mark, Larry, all the different people that are out here, Judge Knapp, you name it. The reality is that a lot of stuff people that do, they're not getting paid for it. The things that people do, there's things, the websites come out of their own pockets. So we're not getting like $30,000 a show like Rachel Maddow or anything. Most of them aren't getting, sometimes we're not getting 30 cents a show. So it's important that all the hundreds of thousands of people that are parts, millions literally, of the alternative media sphere do everything they can to help keep everybody going who's doing this very, very important work. Boosty.to /the real politique. That's Mark Sleboda. Make sure you go there and check it out now. And of course, get the link and share it on all your social media platforms. Mark, thanks a lot. Certainly appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Garland.
All righty. Thank you. You too. All right, everybody. And by the way, follow me on Rockfin, follow me on Rumble, and follow me on all that kind of stuff. Telegram, you name it, if you can afford it. Whether it's Patreon, buy me a coffee is an easy one. And just go there. It's like, buy Garland a coffee. How much? $5. How many? 1, a million, whatever you can afford. And when you do that, it's just like Patreon. You can do one time or you can do it monthly. Of course, here's something else. I got PayPal, all that stuff, but here's something else. If you look scrolling across the bottom now, I have a P.O. box. It's P.O. Box 32, whatever the hell it is. It's going down across the bottom. Feel free if you want to mail anything. If you want to mail a book, if you want to mail a magazine, if you just want to write a card or a letter and say, hey, hi, Garland, blah, blah, blah. I respond to a lot of them. Guess what? I have a file right here with all of my letters and all of the stuff that I get. If you want to mail a donation, it doesn't matter. It's up to you. There you go. P.O. Box 32. So feel free to snail mail me also. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'll be back on with Larry Johnson at